Saving Private Ryan is widely regarded as one of the greatest war movies ever made. But I've got some thoughts. Spoilers ahead. Specifically, I don't think we're being told the story that we think we're being told. This isn't Private Ryan's story. It's not Captain Miller's story. It's Corporal Upham's story. Famously, Steven Spielberg pulls a little rope-a-dope on us with the opening scene when he shows us this man at Arlington National Cemetery in present day. We then get a fade from his face to the face of Captain John Miller back in 1944 while he's taking part in the Normandy invasion on D-Day in World War II. So we're led to believe that the old man was the older version of Captain John Miller and that we're being told the story from his point of view. Only to have the rug pulled out from under us late into the movie when we learn that Captain Miller doesn't actually make it through the final battle alive. And we see the fade from a young Private Ryan back to the face of the old man in Arlington National Cemetery in present day. That's the moment we're meant to realize that it was actually through the eyes of Private Ryan that we were actually seeing the story unfold. But there's one problem. We don't actually see Private Ryan until roughly halfway through the movie. How could we be seeing the first half of the movie through his eyes if he wasn't actually there? I believe the answer is that we're actually being told the story as it was recounted to Private Ryan. But the question then becomes, who told him the story? I believe it was this man, Corporal Upham himself. Let's look at the facts. We know that it couldn't be Caparzo or Wade, as neither of them made it through the movie up to the point where we meet Ryan, so they couldn't have told him. Certainly there was a time between when the group first met Ryan and when the battle happened that anyone could have shared with him the events that led up to it. Of course, we aren't shown that, and they, of course, were spending most of that time preparing for the final battle. And the level of detail in that story would have really required more time to share. So I'll go ahead and cross that off the list and call it unlikely. This means it would have had to have happened after the final battle scene. That rules out Sergeant Horvath, Private Jackson, Private Mellish, and Captain Miller, as none of them make it through the final battle alive, leaving us with only two individuals who could have possibly shared the events of the first half of the movie with Private Ryan. That's Corporal Upham and Private Reiben. Now, in the aftermath of the final battle, it's likely that Ryan, Reiben, and Upham were split up in rather short order. Ryan was, of course, sent home, which was the entire reason for the mission. Reiben, the only survivor from his initial unit, was likely sent back out to the front lines, and Upham back to his unit, leaving little time to share the details of that story during the war, which means that the story would have had to have been communicated to Ryan after the war ended, perhaps even years later. But by whom? Let's look at Private Reiben first. After the final battle of the movie, there was still nearly a year left in World War II. For Private Reiben, this means a higher chance of not making it through the war alive. But for the sake of argument, let's assume that he did. If Reiben were the one to share the story with Ryan, would the story have sounded the way that it did? Would this tough guy from the streets of Brooklyn have been able to portray Captain Miller in as deeply a human fashion as we see in the movie, or recount the things that Wade said about his mother, or the poetry that Upham shared from Alfred Lord Tennyson? No. My feeling is that if we were being shown a story as told by Private Reiben to Ryan, we would have seen a much different movie that leaned much less on the humanistic side of the characters. Additionally, and very importantly, there is one scene in the movie that Private Reiben would have no details from which to share. That is the gruesome death of Private Mellish. Mellish was on the losing end of one of the most memorable examples of hand-to-hand combat ever put to film. We see that on screen, and if we're being shown that as part of the story that was recounted to Private Ryan, only one person was there to witness that scene. That's this man, Corporal Upham. He is the one who recounted the events of the first half of the movie to Private Ryan. Upham is very likely to have survived the war, given the fact that his presence in any battle at all was an anomaly. He was not infantry. He hadn't fired a gun since basic training. And after the final battle, it's likely that he was sent back to his job as a cartographer and an interpreter, never being in the line of fire again, making it more likely that he survived the war. And we can expect that Upham went home after the war and lived a life dealing with severe PTSD due to both his actions and his inaction during that final battle, along with everything he'd seen in the previous few days leading up to it. His thoughts after the war would have continuously come back to the one man that was the reason for him being there, Private James Francis Ryan. A man like Upham, spending his entire life attempting to make peace with those events of those few days, would have been more likely to reach out to Ryan after the war. Alternatively, Ryan may have initiated contact himself, stricken with the guilt of so many lives being cut short simply to find him and send him home, needing to know more about the group that was sent to get him before Captain Miller uttered his famous last words, "Earn this." Perhaps Ryan tracked down Upham himself, knowing he was the only one of the survivors who could really tell him any info to share from those days. Either way, it sets up the scenario needed for Upham to recount the stories to Ryan. Upham, a writer and a poet, would have had the skills to verbally paint the picture that we were shown on screen, the ability to give stories a touch of humanism and to flesh out each character and share the detailed dialogue so eloquently. And to add an extra layer, given that we're now being told a story secondhand by someone who was not there for half of it, by definition, none of the details can be fully trusted as 100% accurate. Any number of those details could have been misremembered or misconstrued by Ryan. Even the story that Upham told Ryan may not have been fully accurate. Upham clearly made Captain Miller the hero of this story, and not just because of his wartime heroics. He actually saw the human side of Miller, and that's what he felt made him a hero. Miller was someone who dared to have a conscience in a situation where Upham felt it was needed most. So Upham's recounting of the story could have very well elevated some while denigrating others that he saw as less than Captain Miller. It's quite possible that the story we were told was embellished and to some degree inaccurate, with the memories changing over the years. So we may never know the actual story of what occurred during those few days in 1944. We'll only know what we've been told. But now, we know who actually told it.